Good morning, students. In the last class, we have discussed about the K-mean algorithm. We have discussed how K-mean algorithm works and how we are forming the cluster in the K-means algorithm. So in today's class, we'll discuss the implementation of K-mean algorithm in Python. For the implementation purpose, I'm using Jupyter here. You can use Google Colab or any other platform for implementation purpose. So if you remember that in the K-mean clustering algorithm, we are forming the various cluster of same type. Okay, so we are considering here one data set which is available online with the mall customer data set. So what we are doing, this data set consisting of the detail of customer who are frequently visiting the mall, and we are having certain information related to the customer like gender, age, annual income, and the spending score. And I want to form a cluster of similar kind of customer who are annual income and spending score are similar. I want to form a cluster for them. So to make a cluster, I'm using here K-mean algorithm. So in the data set, we are consisting of 5 features, but here for the implementation purpose, we are taking only 2 features. One is annual income and the spending score. On the basis of that, we want to perform a cluster using K-mean algorithm. So before going in depth about the implementation part, just I want to again I want to tell you that we have to include some of the important libraries here. So we are importing NumPy, we are importing pandas here. As you know that we are using NumPy and pandas, and we are using here matplotlib library to plot the graphs. Fine. So first of all, what I'm doing, I'm reading a CSV file using pandas, and my CSV file name is this. Okay, and I'm storing this into a variable my data. Okay. Now I want to display what is available in my data set. So using dot head, it will display the first 5 rows of my data set. So this is my data set. This is how my data set look like. Now I told you that it have multiple features, but I'm considering only 2 features, annual income and spending score. So I have to extract only those features from the data set. So I'm considering one new variable with the name of ID, and I'm taking my data, and from there I'm taking only 2 data points. One is annual income, another one is spending score. Okay, so we have taken these 2 data points. Now I have my data set ready with me. Now I want to perform K-mean algorithm. So if I want to use K-mean algorithm, I have to import from the sklearn. So I am importing K-mean from the sklearn. So from K-mean, from sklearn, we have imported the K-mean. Now we have to initialize some of the parameters when I'm using K-mean algorithm. Okay, so I have to tell that how many number of cluster I want to make. So I told you in the previous class that making a cluster, it depends on us, that I want to form a cluster manually or I want to form a cluster using algo method. So first I will tell you that how, when we are doing manually, then how it will work, and when we are doing with the algo method, how it will work. So my first thing I'm passing here the number of cluster. I want to perform 2 cluster. I want to make only 2 clusters. So I have initialized n cluster value is 2. Another one is n init equal to 10. So if you remember, we have discussed that every time what we are doing, we are initializing the centroid points. So first time initialize the centroid points, and what we'll do, we'll compare each data point with the centroid and we'll see the distance. The data point which is near to the centroid, it means that data point belong to that particular centroid and it will form a cluster. So how many times you want to repeat the same thing to form a final cluster? That value you need to define. So in this case, we are defining that value as 10. So n init is here 10. It means 10 times it will initialize the centroid, and finally it will form a final cluster after 10 iterations. And you know what is random state. So we initialize here random state equal to 0. It means why we are taking random state here 0? See, whenever I am executing the program, whenever I am executing this particular code, it should randomly take the same data points every time. Okay. So if we'll not define random state equal to 0, what we'll do, randomly it will take some different data points, and every time you will get the different accuracy. So to make my accuracy stable, I'm using random state equal to 0 so that it will take the same data points in every execution. So I hope it is clear. These 2 lines are clear to you. Now I define what are the parameters required for performing the K-mean algorithm. Now I'm fitting my model. So I fit my model on so and so data set, which is IV, which I mentioned here IV. So I fit my model, and now I want to perform the prediction on the data set. So when I execute these two lines of code, we'll get the result here. So my data, you can see here, my data is divided into two clusters, the cluster 1 and the cluster 0. So these data point belongs to cluster 0 and these data point belongs to cluster 1. So this is the manual method when we are defining cluster value manually, which is 2 here. But it is not always a very good method. We can say define the cluster manually. So we are having the another method which we'll call it as elbow method. So elbow method we are using here. So we'll see the implementation that when I'm using elbow method, how it works. So what is the use of elbow method here? Elbow method we are using to select the number of clusters. So you can see the code here. We'll go line by line. So what we are doing, we are defining one variable within sum of square, which we are going to use further. So that is an empty list we have defined. Now I'm using a for loop, which is range between 1 to 11. Why I took 1 to 11? You can see here. What we have done, I want to repeat the same thing how many times? 11, 10 times. So because I want to perform this thing 10 times and initially I should be what? 10. So I want to perform the same thing 10 times. So I'm using 1 to 11. Okay, so and you can see the number of cluster could be between 1 to this. So this is representing your x-axis. Fine. Now what I'm saying, the same code what we have written here, the same code we are writing here. We are writing the same code, but at the place of writing here number of values, 2 or 3 or whatever, we are using here I. So I we are calculating using this. So I value could be between 1 to 11. My cluster could be maximum between 1 to minimum it can be 1 and maximum it could be 11. So I am defining here range between 1 to 11 and the same k-mean fit I have used for my data point. Fine. And now here with this line of code, we are implementing here elbow method, which will give me the value of I. Final value of number of cluster will be given by this particular line of code. So this is nothing but what you are doing. You are calculating the distortion here. So you are calculating the distortion means what? For every k, you will compute the distortion, which is also we are calling it as sum of square errors. So here we are calculating sum of square errors, or we can call it as inertia, or we can call it as within cluster sum of square. So we are calculating for every k point, we are calculating the sum of square error, and sum of square error is nothing but it is just a distance between the each data point and the centroid of each cluster. So we are calculating the distance between each data point and the centroid of its assigned cluster. Using that, we want to find out that how many number of clusters we can have. And finally, we are printing the value of I comma k means. So what we are doing here, you can see here, it is finding the value. Okay, so it's showing the value of every time. How many iteration we have done? We have done total 10 iterations. So it is showing for every iteration, it is showing the value. Okay, so we are getting the final value. Now these values I want to plot. I want to plot these values. So if I want to plot these values, I have used just a simple thing like I want to range between 1 to 11, which is there in my within sum of square, and my x label is number of cluster, my y label is within sum of square, and title of the graph I am giving elbow plot, and the same value when I am plotting here, you can see. So my within sum of square value which I calculated, which I am taking here, which is represented here. My range means I can have one maximum number of 1 to 11 cluster. Okay. So it will be how many times it will run, means 10 total, 10 maximum I can have 10 cluster with me. Fine. So now when I plot all these values which I have calculated on this graph, the shape will become like an elbow, human elbow. So you can see this shape is like a human elbow, and wherever you will see the curve, that is representing your number of clusters. So you can see here this shape is here like an elbow, and I'm saying that number of clusters will be here 5. So in the k-mean algorithm, I'm saying number of clusters will be 5, and I want to repeat the same thing 10 times, random state equal to 0, and finally I'm predicting the value. So I hope it is clear that how we can find the number of cluster using elbow method. So we found the number of cluster using elbow method, and when we executed this line of code, you can see there that we have now 5 number of clusters, 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So total how many clusters I am having? Total I am having 5 clusters. Okay. Now I want to just see the first 5 predicted value I want to see. Okay. So I want to see the first 5 predicted values. So I'm using k-means.fit predicted of this, and I'm storing these value into a variable which is I have given the name as cluster. Okay. So I created one new variable with the name of cluster, and the predicted value of the cluster I'm storing in this value. So whatever value I'm going to predict, that value should be stored in this cluster variable, and I want to print the first 5 line of data. So just I executed here and I got here. You can see the first employer, or we can say the first customer belongs to cluster 4, the second customer belongs to cluster 3, third customer belongs to cluster 4, and so on so far. Okay. So this is the visualization of my cluster. Now the same visualization I want to do through graph. So that also we can do here. You can see here we have shown all the 5 clusters with the different colors here, and it's showing the number of clusters. So red is showing that careful, your spending is high. Okay. Green is showing it's a standard, your as per income score and your spending, it is standard. Okay. Gray is showing it's a careless. Maroon is showing you are a sensible person, and blue is saying the target. Okay. So these some labels we have given to every cluster using our code. So when we executed this line of code, when my cluster value is 0 and income is in so and so range, in the same way your spending score is so and so, then you are giving the color red and you are giving the label as colorful. So you've executed the whole code for every what we can say for every cluster, and you've got the final k-mean cluster here. Fine. So this is representing my data set is divided into 5 different clusters, and I have given the label to each cluster. Okay. Now just if you want to play more with your data or more with your you want to see more details into that, you can execute the other line of code where what I'm saying, where I want to check the detail of the people who belongs to cluster 4. So I'm using here my data of cluster where value is equal to 4 and spending is between this. I want to display the result using the variable cluster. So you can see the people who are spending score is between this range, their cluster value is 4. So you can see here the people who are spending between 4 to we can say 40, as per this 4 to 40, they belongs to cluster 4. So these people belongs to cluster 4. So in that way you can work on the data set. So this is all about the k-mean algorithm. I hope it is clear to you. Thank you so much.